Welcome to Aurigny On The Airwaves, a podcast series with me, James Filleul, which takes you behind the scenes of Guernsey's airline, Aurigny. Join us as we meet the dedicated people who make the airline soar, giving the Guernsey community a deeper look into the organisation and its operations. So on today's podcast, I'm joined by Lottie Roberts, who's the Safety and Compliance Officer for Aurigny, and Jason Bowley, who's the Head of Maintenance for Aurigny, Guernsey's airline. So that's what we're here to talk about today. Firstly, could you just give me a little bit of a flavour of your background? So maybe Jason, we'll start with you and then we'll move on to Lottie. So just a flavour of your background, how you came to Guernsey, what did you do before you came, just a flavour of your career to date.
Yeah, no problem. So I grew up in Reading in the UK and growing up in the 70s there, obviously on the flight path to Heathrow Airport and Concorde and 707s and lots of noisy aircraft flying over, which caught my attention as a boy. I joined the Air Cadets, which is a great place to start for any aviation enthusiast. And then went through my education, applied to British Airways for an engineering apprenticeship in 1989. Completed that, went on to do my BTEC and did a degree at University of Hertfordshire. Went back to British Airways, worked for them for 20 years in all the areas of aircraft maintenance. Started off on TriStars and 747s, 320s, things like that. Had a great career at British Airways, really loved it. And met a Guernsey girl along the way. And then one day she said, I'd like to move back to Guernsey. I'd been here lots of times and I thought, what's not to like? I'll take that opportunity, and here I am since 2008.
I'm working for Aurigny.
And enjoying it.
So we'll go through some of the differences, the lots of differences between Aurigny and British Airways in a second from a maintenance point of view. But Lottie, the same question for you. How did you get to this point?
Yeah, so I started for Aurigny in 2013. I was 18 years old and you had to be 18 to be cabin crew. That's what I was waiting for, that's what I did. And I flew for a number of years. Unfortunately, I lost my medical and that's what turned my career into probably what it is now. So I did some work in ground operations for Aurigny, went off and did some other things, did some travelling. And then after the pandemic, I came back to Aurigny to do the role I do today.
And just explain to me a little bit about what that is.
So I am Aurigny's Safety and Compliance Officer. So my day-to-day looks at receiving reports from our staff, pilots, cabin crew, ground staff, engineers. And we process those, we assess the likelihood that they were to cause a problem for us, and by a problem, of course, that varies depending on the report, and we compare our policies, make sure that they're up to date, make sure that they're functioning and suitable, and make sure that everything we're doing is in the best interests of safety of our people, our passengers and our aircraft. Okay,
so you've been at Aurigny for a number of years now. Just give me a flavour of what is it that attracts you about working for Aurigny?
For me, it's the people. Our staff are some of our best friends. We really are a little family. And our customers, the benefit of working for a small airline is you get to know people. And I still see customers throughout the airport today that I saw when I was cabin crew and continue to see now, and children who you once handed out safety equipment to, seatbelts and life jackets, are going off to university and all sorts of things. So it's that close-knit nature. I'm invested in the people, Guernsey's people, our staff.
Yeah, so you've really grown up with the airline through its recent history. Okay, and Jason, so you work for British Airways, very big organisation, Aurigny a much smaller one. Just compare and contrast a little bit for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, working for Aurigny is about the community, serving the community. Last year we flew 470,000 passengers, and we're very much involved and engaged in the movement of the population of Guernsey. And yeah, I think it's about serving the community and that feeling you're serving the community. Working for a smaller airline, at BA we had say 5,000 engineers, and you'd work with people that you'd never met before, even over a 20-year period. Whereas now we've got a really close-knit team, some people with a lot of service, 30, 40 years, know the island well, know the aircraft well, and we can integrate all that experience to ensure safe operations and efficient operations, because we can get around the table and thrash things out sort of much quicker than you can in a big organisation.
And the same standards are applied between the two?
Absolutely, yeah. It's regulated by the CAA, or the Civil Aviation Authority, as everybody we will know. And yeah, absolutely, the regulation applies right across the civil aviation world. So absolutely.
All right, so you both mentioned safety in your comments so far, key part of what you both do. So I'm going to ask you both the same question as to what elements of your role specifically focus on safety, and how do you go about doing that? So Lottie, perhaps we'll start with you and then we'll come to Jason.
Absolutely. So for me personally, most of my role is safety, and it's often around building a culture, education around what safety and safety management systems, SMS, in aviation really means, and developing a relationship of trust with our people, that they will share things that might concern them, or that they potentially make an error themselves, and that in turn we will ensure just treatment and fairness, and our goal always to be preventing harm, whether that's reputational, physical, financial, whatever that looks like, and really fostering that with our people so they can go out and foster that with our customers. It doesn't fall really on you and I.
And that's a cumulative process, presumably. You're learning from past experiences and building each time.
Absolutely. Industry as a whole obviously has learnt a lot from previous events, which thankfully not inclusive of Auringy in the most part. But yeah, absolutely. It's looking at the whole industry and learning around things that happen, or proactively finding things that our subject matter experts say, I'm not comfortable with this, or I think we could do this better, or a piece of equipment I used at another airline worked really well for this, and here's why. So it's always learning, always developing, with that ultimate goal of improving every day.
Okay. And Jason, from a maintenance point of view, obviously very closely related to safety, how do you see it?
Well, safety is intrinsic through the industry, through everything we do, through regulation. The regulation is there, Act of Parliament, the navigation order, and down from there, really. So we have to write procedures in everything that we do against the regulation, and those procedures have to be adhered to. They're audited by Safety and Compliance team and the Civil Aviation Authority come in to do that as well regularly. So it's intrinsic throughout everything we do. And obviously, Lottie mentioned the safety management system, which is now mandatory in aircraft maintenance, further rooting in the intrinsic principle of a fair and just culture, setting up a safety culture so that everybody feels that they can speak openly about their concerns or how they feel about work or the operation of the airline. And Lottie's team and my team, we get together and ensure that we manage those concerns and work particularly towards the procedures that we've got.
And training and qualifications must be a big part of that too.
Absolutely. I mean, to release an aircraft to service, you have to be a licensed aircraft maintenance engineer, and that is quite an arduous professional qualification to get. Generally, it takes about 8 years from thinking I'm going to be a licensed engineer to actually signing an aircraft.
And what's involved in that? What's involved in the 8 years?
Well, it's a mixture of modules. You have to do modules like on aerodynamics and engines and human factors, a wide variety of academic examinations that you have to pass. And also it's about aptitude. Can you actually use tools and fix the aircraft? It's a big part of it. And then experience. So you need 5 years experience, supervised experience, so you're not out there on your own fixing aircraft. Another licensed engineer is overseeing all your work, and eventually you bundle all that together, send it off to the Civil Aviation Authority, and they decide whether you have enough experience, and there may be an iteration where they send it back, but ultimately then they give you that license. Then you have to do type training, so you have to do an extensive course and pass exams on the type that you're working on. And then you come to the compliance team and the head of maintenance, myself, and we decide whether you're suitably fit and qualified to fix the aircraft.
Complex and detailed process.
It is, extremely.
I mean, where the general public, the travelling public, fit into it, they might hear that an aircraft's gone tech. It's quite a common phrase, both within the industry and with the general public. Well, what exactly do you mean when you say an aircraft has gone tech? Okay, so it's a phrase that strikes fear in everybody's heart, I think, from the aviation public, because of disruption and delays. But at the end of the day, safety is paramount, and it's really important that we address any concerns prior to flight. So when it's announced that an aircraft is tech, it would mean that there's a defect on the aircraft that's been identified by the crew and communicated by the captain. And then we would dispatch engineers to assess that. So that could be something really simple that could be fixed quite quickly, and still need an engineer sign off. So any work that's done on the aircraft will need this qualified person to sign off. It may be that we have the spare and we can quickly fix the aircraft with the passengers on. We might need to move the aircraft, so we might need to take the passengers off. Ultimately, if we can't fix it quickly, there is a document we can use called the minimum equipment list, which allows the aircraft to stay in service under certain conditions. There's a lot of redundancy in the systems, and it may be, for example, your car, your windscreen wipers. If it's not raining, you might elect to drive home despite that. And as long as it's not raining, it's safe to do so. So in an aircraft, for example, both wipers are controlled separately. If one fails, the minimum equipment list will allow us to fly on for a limited time with a procedure for so that the crew are aware of the safe operation of the aircraft, and that will allow us to fly on for some time before we can do the repairs. So it doesn't automatically mean, in very basic terms, the aircraft is broken. There's a lot more variation and nuance to it than that, right?
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot of redundancy in the systems, but it does mean that we need engineering. Engineering will always be involved in a technical situation to use that experience and qualification and procedure to determine whether the aircraft is fit for service, and it will only be signed off when it's safe and fit for service.
It's important for people to understand that. Lottie, do you think exactly what the term means and when it's used and why it's used?
Yeah, I think it's important that we all remember that declaring an aircraft tech isn't a decision that's taken lightly and isn't an indication that an aircraft is unsafe. In fact, it's a decision that's been made in the best interest of the safety of everybody.
Okay, all right. Well, let's move on a little bit. Some of the other issues which have come up fairly frequently in Guernsey over the last couple of years. One of those is obviously the Embraer jet, which was part of the fleet, now isn't. How do you both see that? Maybe again we'll start with Jason and move on to Lottie.
The Embraer is a great aeroplane, and I think it's well documented the reasons we bought it in the first place. And it served us well. It served the community well, and it was very popular. I think there's massive issues with operating one aircraft in amongst other types. So at the time we were operating 3 different aircraft types, and ultimately you need the infrastructure around all that. For example, we carry about £1 million worth of ATR spares to service those aircraft.
When you carry, you mean you hold those in Guernsey?
We hold those in stock in Guernsey.
Okay.
Because we're an island, we need accessibility, so that adds a little bit of complication. So we carry quite a lot of stock, and at the moment it's about £1 million worth of stock. So for every aircraft, you then need to multiply that. So we were carrying about £700,000 worth of stock for the Embraer for one aircraft. But it's an extremely complex aircraft, and you can never have what you need all the time. The main issue with the aircraft really is just its age. Coming up for 10 years, the maintenance program means that there's quite extensive maintenance to do, including engines, which are really expensive, thrust reversers, which we were looking at repairs of in the order of 10 million. So in a company with £60 million turnover a year, you can see how that is very troublesome. So, I believe it was the right decision to move away from that aircraft and focus on the ATR.
Okay, and Lottie, you had a similar experience?
Absolutely. I loved the jet. I was on the first flight. I was on the crew. I've got a tattoo of it. But it doesn't change the fact that absolutely I would echo Jason's thoughts there, that actually the airline made a decision in the best interest of Guernsey's people and our travel continuity. And it may not have felt like that at the time, but hopefully as we move forward, that will become more realistic for people and realised for people.
Okay, well, let's pick up that point about the decision-making, Auringy. You say it's for Guernsey and Guernsey's people. Obviously, the tagline is Guernsey's airline. What part of your role is bringing through younger recruits and educating younger people about aviation, but Auringy specifically? So how does that work? What sort of response do you get?
I think for me, my role in safety is a holistic picture. I don't believe that it needs to be aviation specific, and so when we are opening our industry to new young people, I want them to feel welcome, I want them to feel safe, and I think it's important. I went to school here. I'll be honest, I didn't do very well at school here, but actually I think it is important that those of us that perhaps felt a bit lost and were found by aviation and by Auringy kind of share that with the next generation. And yeah, it's a privilege to be able to do that and to share with. What
sort of response do you get there? People, does everyone want to be a pilot, or what's the kind of response you get from kids?
No, not really, not anymore. No, I think there's a broad spectrum of interest in our island for all sorts of aviation careers. And yeah, certainly Jason's engineers and that engineering department is incredibly popular and attracts an awful lot of questions and applicants and work experience and all those things that we love to be able to provide. But yeah, I think it's important we remember that there is more to aviation than pilots, cabin crew and engineers, and you can have whole careers in aviation that maybe don't even touch a plane. If you like numbers and planes, then maybe accounting in aviation is for you. And I think that's an important thing for us to remember.
Jason, is that your experience too in terms of bringing younger engineers through from Guernsey? Do you think they can learn over here and be trained over here, or do you think they need to move and come back like you did?
Well, most of our engineers are local and were trained here. Obviously, there's input from the UK. We use companies like KLM and Resource Group to do training because these training organisations are actually based in the UK. But absolutely, I mean, most of our engineers would have started through work experience. And we've got guys now that are there through work experience and are now licensed aircraft engineers and certifying engineers. So we can do it. And I think, from Guernsey PLC point of view, having careers available on island in aviation is really important. I mean, it's such an intrinsic part of our island culture. 300 odd jobs, all contributing to the day-to-day workings of Guernsey, either through paying tax or doing a job. I think it's really important, and for our youth to have hope that they can get involved in the career of their choice on island with a long-standing, high-quality company.
And it might be quite daunting for some people to think, they're going to be maintaining an aircraft. I mean, there's a huge amount of responsibility for that. But at each stage in that learning process, you're supervised and watched effectively by someone who is fully qualified.
Absolutely, yeah. That's the form, that's the program, that's what everybody understands. And in fact, everybody that comes into the hangar, we make it very clear right from the start. And it can be difficult, when you say to a youngster, someone's going to look over you and double check, triple check what you do, but that is what we do. And then people write into a logbook, and then that is signed, oversigned. But absolutely, supervision all the time, and it just takes a little while in our industry for people to get to know that. In other industries you may be more autonomous, but safety is so important, and what we do is so technical that it's very important that everybody is supervised, and they just have to get used to that.
Okay. Now, look, you're both clearly very passionate about the business that you do and the business that you're in. Lottie, you say, aviation kind of found you in a way, rescued you in some ways. But how would you talk now about working in that sector, but also about working for Auringy specifically?
What sort if I was looking back on it? I guess, I mean, I've had such a fulfilling career, and actually I was equipped to go and do things that if you'd have asked me in 2013 in that classroom if I'd have ever done, I'd have laughed in your face. But in reality, since then, I've been a full aircraft de-icer. I've been able to go and travel and do things and experience bits of industry that I didn't even know existed when I first started out.
I mean, most people in the islands, they have to fly quite often. Some people are quite nervous about that. Does that touch your role as well, that you might try and help them?
It certainly has done in my career, not so much today, but certainly we train and foster a relationship with the people that would. I think it's important that we recognise that we've been surrounded by the principles of flight and why aircraft can and do fly, certainly for a really long time. And so I think it's important for us as professionals and an industry of professionals to recognise that we owe it to concerned members of the public to really have those conversations. I generally am more likely to have them now sort of in the supermarket or at forest stores, but in reality those are real privileged moments. We are equipped as an airline to give people positive experiences of flying, and particularly for customers who are resident of Alderney, that actually is going to be part of their lives consistently. Unfortunately, sometimes you're forced to fly for medical reasons, and so absolutely we want to be able to help people understand how and why flying works. We wouldn't do it if it wasn't safe, but also to address some of the more technical concerns that people have and equip staff to have that knowledge and to share it with people in a way that's accessible.
Okay, and Jason, I mean, I guess it's a final point really, but the industry's it's had some tough years, and Aurigny's been obviously part of that. It's not been straightforward over the last few years. How do you see that now, looking back, and the value that Aurigny plays in Guernsey?
Well, I think looking back to COVID, we continue to maintain the fleet and give connectivity to Southampton, particularly, which was a lifeline route. And I think, as we settle and stabilise on the type of aircraft that we want to fly, you will see more stability. I think globally the market is starting to recover from the effects of the pandemic, whereby a lot of our suppliers, parts suppliers, lost staff, global wars where very basic materials are difficult to come by, which is affecting the supply chain. So we're starting to see that recovery, and I say simplifying the fleet is certainly the way forward to a more resilient operation, and I think we're well on the way to cementing that resilience.
Okay, all right, Jason, Lottie, thank you both very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to Auringy on the Airwaves with me, James Filleul. Check out the rest of this podcast series to find out more about Guernsey's airline, Aurigny.